I discovered my husband was having an affair with his secretary. When I found out, I took a deep breath and did something no one expected. For 23 years, I built everything alongside him. The company, the success, the life we shared. But while I worked behind the scenes, he paraded around the office with her, humiliating me in front of everyone who knew us. They thought I was just a wife at home, oblivious and powerless. The secretary believed she had won, that she would take my place in every way. My husband thought I would cry, beg, and accept the betrayal like so many do. But they had no idea what was coming. That company they enjoyed so much, those assets he flaunted, that control he thought was his alone. None of it was quite what it seemed. I had been patient, observant, and strategic for years. And when the moment came for the truth to surface, I didn't hesitate. What I did changed everything in a single afternoon. Some said I was cold, others said I was brilliant. But one thing nobody could deny: justice was served, and they never saw it coming. This is my story. I never imagined my life would turn into one of those stories you hear about but never think will happen to you. For 23 years, I dedicated myself to building a life with the man I loved. We started from nothing, absolutely nothing. He had ambition and charm. I had business sense and determination. Together, we created something remarkable. But somewhere along the way, he forgot who had been there from the beginning. He forgot who I really was. It started small, the way these things always do. Late nights at the office became more frequent. Business trips extended without clear explanations. His phone became a sacred object, always face down, always password protected. I noticed the new cologne, the extra attention to his appearance, the distance growing between us like a silent chasm. My heart knew something was wrong, but my mind refused to accept it. I told myself it was stress, business pressure, the weight of running a successful company. I made excuses because the truth was too painful to face. The company we built together had grown beyond our wildest dreams. What started as a small consulting firm in our garage had become a major player in corporate strategy and business development. We employed over 60 people, had clients across the country, and generated millions in annual revenue. Everyone in our professional circle knew our story. The power couple who built an empire from scratch. Except the story they knew was incomplete. Most people assumed he was the mastermind, the brilliant entrepreneur who made it all happen. I was seen as the supportive wife, perhaps involved in some administrative capacity, but ultimately in his shadow. The truth was far different. I had been there for every decision, every strategy, every pivot that led to our success. In those early years, I worked 18-hour days while he handled client relationships and presentations. I built the systems, developed the methodologies, created the frameworks that became our competitive advantage. But I never needed the spotlight. I was content to work behind the scenes, to let him be the face of the company while I ensured everything ran smoothly. It was a partnership, or so I believed. The secretary's name was constantly mentioned at home. At first, it seemed innocent enough. She was efficient, proactive, always willing to stay late and help with important projects. He praised her constantly. "She's so dedicated," he would say. "Really understands the business." I should have seen the warning signs then, but trust can make you blind to the obvious. I even felt grateful that he had such competent support at the office. Then came the company anniversary party 6 months ago. It was held at an upscale hotel downtown, a celebration of another record-breaking year. I spent weeks planning every detail, from the catering to the entertainment. That night, I wore my best dress, had my hair done professionally, wanted to look perfect for our big celebration. But from the moment we arrived, something felt wrong. He barely stayed by my side. He was always across the room, always near her. I watched them throughout the evening. The way he laughed at everything she said. The way she touched his arm, lingering just a moment too long. The way other employees exchanged knowing glances when they were together. My stomach twisted with a sick feeling I couldn't shake. When I tried to join their conversation, the atmosphere changed immediately. They became formal, distant, like I was interrupting something private. "Having a good time?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Of course, darling," he said without looking at me. "Just discussing the Henderson project with Sarah. You know how important that account is." but they weren't discussing business. I could tell by the way they had been standing, the intimacy of their body language. That night, I cried in the bathroom while the party continued without me. I felt invisible in my own celebration, at my own company's event. My hands trembled as I gripped the marble countertop, staring at my reflection. When had I become this woman? When had I allowed myself to become so powerless? If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment what you would do in this situation. The evidence became impossible to ignore. I found restaurant receipts for places we had never been together. Credit card charges for jewelry I had never received. Once, I called his office late at night when he said he was working, and she answered his private line. "Oh, he just stepped out for a moment," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Should I have him call you back?" The way she said "stepped out" made my blood run cold. They were alone in his office at 11 at night, and she answered his phone like it was the most natural thing in the world. I started paying closer attention to everything. I noticed how our intimate life had become practically non-existent. How he found excuses to work weekends. How he became irritable whenever I suggested we spend time together. The man I had built a life with was disappearing before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Or so I thought. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had been feeling ill all morning, a persistent headache that wouldn't go away. I decided to leave the charity luncheon early and surprise him at the office. Maybe we could grab lunch together, reconnect like we used to. I walked into our building, greeted the receptionist warmly, and took the elevator to the executive floor. My heels clicked on the marble as I approached his office. His door was slightly ajar. I heard her voice first, soft and intimate. "You work too hard. Let me help you relax." Then I heard him laugh. That deep laugh I remembered from our early days together. "You always know exactly what I need, Sarah." My hand froze on the door handle. I felt my face burning with shame, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I should have burst in, confronted them immediately. But I couldn't move. I stood there in the hallway, paralyzed by the betrayal unfolding behind that door. I don't know how long I stood there. It felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, I turned and walked away, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not where employees could see me fall apart. I made it to my car before the sobs came, violent and uncontrollable. 23 years. 23 years of love, partnership, sacrifice. And this was what it had become. That night, he came home late as usual. I was sitting in the living room, the lights off, staring at nothing. "You're still up?" he asked, loosening his tie. "I'm exhausted. Big day at the office." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. "I'm sure it was," I said quietly. He didn't catch the edge in my voice, or if he did, he chose to ignore it. He kissed the top of my head absently and went upstairs. I sat there in the darkness, feeling the floor opening beneath my feet, and made a decision. I would not be a victim. I would not beg or plead or fall apart. I would be strategic, just like I had always been in business. The next morning, I started gathering evidence. I hired a private investigator, a professional who came highly recommended. Within 2 weeks, I had photographs, timestamps, hotel receipts. They had been carrying on for over 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of betrayal. 8 months of making a fool of me. The investigator's report was thorough and damning. Lunches that lasted 3 hours. Afternoon meetings at luxury hotels. Weekend conferences that she mysteriously also attended. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? But I didn't confront him yet. I had something else to do first. Something I should have done years ago but had never felt necessary. I made an appointment with our corporate attorney, Marcus, someone I had known since the early days of the company. "I need to review some documents," I told him. "Ownership structures, partnership agreements, that sort of thing." He looked surprised. "Of course. Is everything all right?" I smiled tightly. "Just being thorough." What I discovered in those documents changed everything. You see, when we first started the company 23 years ago, we were practically kids. Young, ambitious, and completely in love. I had just received a small inheritance from my grandmother, about $200,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was everything to us then. That money became our seed capital, the foundation of everything we built. We registered the company, drafted the initial partnership agreements, and got to work. But here's what almost everyone had forgotten, including him: the way we structured the ownership. On paper, we were equal partners, 50-50, but there was a clause in the original agreement, one we had included as a formality and never thought about again. The clause stated that in the event of dissolution of marriage, the partner who provided the initial capital investment would retain majority control and decision-making authority over the company's future. It was meant to protect us, to ensure that if something went wrong, the business wouldn't be destroyed in a legal battle. That partner was me. I had provided the initial $200,000. I had the documentation to prove it. Bank records showing the transfer from my grandmother's estate into our business account. Over the years, as the company grew and became successful, everyone forgot about those humble beginnings. They forgot who had made it all possible. Even he had forgotten, but I hadn't. Not anymore. Marcus walked me through every detail. This clause is ironclad, he said, adjusting his glasses. If you choose to invoke it, you would have majority control regardless of the current 50-50 equity split. It's unusual, but it's legally binding. I sat back in the leather chair, my mind racing. And he doesn't know about this? Marcus shook his head. I doubt he remembers. This agreement is over 2 decades old. Most people don't revisit their founding documents once the company is established. I spent the next week preparing. I met with accountants, reviewed financial statements, consulted with business advisors. I needed to understand every aspect of our company's current value and operations. What I found was impressive. We were worth significantly more than I had realized, with assets that included not just the business operations but commercial real estate, investment portfolios, and intellectual property. Everything we had built was substantial, and according to that forgotten clause, I had the power to control it all. But I wasn't done gathering information. I also needed to know the extent of his relationship with Sarah. Was it just physical, or had it gone deeper? Were they making plans together? Had he promised her anything? The investigator provided those answers too. They had been discussing a future together. In one recorded conversation at a restaurant, she had asked him about leaving me. "She'll be fine," he had said dismissively. "She'll get the house a settlement. She doesn't really understand the business anyway. Never has." Those words cut deeper than the affair itself. After everything I had done, everything I had built, he genuinely believed I didn't understand the business. He had rewritten history in his mind, convinced himself that he was the architect of our success and I was just along for the ride. The disrespect was breathtaking. My blood boiled with indignation as I listened to that recording. But I kept my composure. Anger was useful only if channeled productively. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. Sarah had also become increasingly bold at the office. According to several employees I discreetly spoke with, she acted like she was already the woman in charge. She made decisions above her authority, spoke dismissively about me to other staff members, and generally behaved as though she had already won. She told me that major changes were coming. One loyal employee confided that the company was going to have new leadership soon. She seemed very pleased about it. I decided the time had come. I scheduled a board meeting for a Friday afternoon, citing important strategic matters that needed to be discussed. Our board was small, just 5 people. Him, me, Marcus our attorney, and 2 outside advisors we had brought on years ago for their expertise. He was surprised when I called the meeting. "What's this about?" he asked. "You never call board meetings." I smiled sweetly. "Just some matters that need attention. You'll see." That Friday, I dressed carefully. A tailored navy suit, elegant but authoritative. My hair perfect, makeup understated. I wanted to look every bit the businesswoman I was. I arrived at the conference room early, my materials prepared, my presentation ready. Marcus arrived next, giving me an encouraging nod. Then the 2 outside advisors. Finally, he walked in with Sarah trailing behind him. "Why is she here?" I asked calmly. "Sarah assists me with all important meetings now," he said. "She needs to stay." I felt my hands trembling with contained rage, but I kept my voice level. "Very well." I began the presentation without preamble. "Thank you all for coming. I've called this meeting to address some critical issues regarding company leadership and direction. I clicked to the first slide, showing our company's founding documents. As you can see, our company was established 23 years ago with initial capital provided by myself through a family inheritance. This capital, $200,000, created the foundation for everything we've built. He shifted uncomfortably. Yes, we all know the history. What's your point? I clicked to the next slide, highlighting the key clause. The point is this ownership clause, which states that the provider of initial capital retains majority control in the event of certain triggering circumstances. One of those circumstances is dissolution of marriage. The room fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. His face went pale. What are you talking about? I looked directly at him, my voice steady and cold. I'm talking about the affair you've been having with your secretary for the past 8 months. I'm talking about the disrespect, the lies, and the betrayal. I'm talking about the fact that you've forgotten who built this company with you. I clicked to the next slide, showing photographs from the private investigator. Hotel entrances, restaurant embraces, damning evidence that couldn't be denied. Sarah gasped. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. You had me followed? You had no right. I had every right, I said calmly. I'm your wife, or I was. As of yesterday, divorce papers were filed, which means this ownership clause is now in effect. I turned to Marcus. Can you confirm? Marcus nodded formally. Yes. Upon filing of divorce proceedings, the clause is legally triggered. Majority control and decision-making authority transfer to the initial capital provider, which in this case is you. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did the right thing. The room erupted. He was shouting about legalities and fairness. Sarah was crying, realizing her future was crumbling. The board advisors were reviewing the documents Marcus distributed, their expressions grave but clear. The clause was legitimate. After 23 years of partnership, I now held the power to determine the company's future, and by extension, his. You can't do this, he said desperately. I built this company. Everyone knows that. You just helped with paperwork in the early days. A cold fury settled over me. I stood up, walked around the table, and looked him in the eye. I didn't just help with paperwork. I built the systems that made us successful. I developed the methodologies that clients pay premium rates for. I managed operations while you played CEO. And I provided the money that started it all. But you've convinced yourself otherwise, just like you convinced yourself that betraying me was acceptable. I turned to address the whole room. Here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, I'm assuming the role of CEO and majority shareholder. There will be a complete restructuring of leadership. I looked at Sarah, who had stopped crying and now looked terrified. Your employment is terminated immediately. Security will escort you out, and you'll receive 2 weeks severance, which is more than you deserve. She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. Don't. You knew exactly what you were doing. You made your choices. Now face the consequences. Then I turned back to him. As for you, you have 2 options. 1, you can stay on in a significantly reduced capacity with a substantial salary cut and 0 decision-making authority. You'll be an employee, nothing more. 2, you can negotiate a buyout of your shares at fair market value and leave the company entirely. Either way, your days of running this business are over. His face turned red with rage and humiliation. You're going to regret this. I'll fight you in court. I'll drag this out for years. I'll destroy you. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You can certainly try, but you'll lose. The documentation is ironclad. The clause is enforceable, and your affair is well documented. No judge will side with you when they see what you've done. Plus, our employees, our clients, our business partners are all going to know the truth about who really built this company. Is that really the legacy you want? The fight went out of him then. He sank back into his chair, the reality of his situation finally hitting him. He had lost everything: his marriage, his company, his authority, because he couldn't keep his vows and because he had underestimated the woman who had been his partner from the beginning. Sarah was already being escorted out by security, crying and protesting. The board advisors were stone-faced but nodded their acceptance of the new structure. Marcus was documenting everything for the legal record. How could you do this? He asked quietly, and for the first time, he sounded broken. How could you be so cold? I sat back down, suddenly feeling very tired. Cold? You destroyed our marriage for a woman young enough to be your daughter. You disrespected everything we built together. You erased my contributions from history. And you want to talk to me about being cold? A lump tightened in my throat, but I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not now. You did this to yourself. Every choice that led to this moment was yours. Comment below what you would have done differently. The meeting ended shortly after. The board advisors would stay on, recognizing that the company needed stability during the transition. Marcus would handle all legal proceedings. He would have 48 hours to make his decision about staying or leaving. I gathered my materials and walked out with my head high, leaving him sitting there in shock. As I passed employees in the hallway, I could see the questions in their eyes. By Monday, everyone would know what had happened. That was fine. Let them know. Let them all know who had really been in charge all along. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and legal documents. He chose the buyout option, unable to stomach the humiliation of staying on as a subordinate employee. The negotiations were brutal but fair. He would receive significant compensation for his shares, enough to live comfortably but nowhere near the full value of what we had built. The affair and his behavior had legal consequences that reduced his settlement. Sarah tried to sue for wrongful termination, but without a case, she eventually gave up when her lawyer explained the reality of her situation. I officially took over as CEO on a Monday morning. I gathered all employees for a company-wide meeting. Standing at the front of the room, looking at the faces of people we had hired and trained over the years, I felt a surge of emotion. I know there have been many rumors and questions about recent changes, I began. I want to be transparent with all of you. After 23 years of partnership, my marriage has ended due to infidelity and broken trust. As a result of that dissolution and in accordance with our founding agreements, I have assumed full leadership of this company. The room was silent. Some of you may be surprised to learn that I was not just a supportive presence in the background of this company's success. I was an active partner from day one. I provided the initial capital. I developed many of the systems and methodologies we still use. I have always been deeply involved in our operations, even when others took public credit. I paused, letting that sink in. Moving forward, we will continue to deliver excellence to our clients. Our work won't change. Our standards won't change. What will change is the recognition that success is built by many people, not just one charismatic leader. The applause that followed was unexpected. Several employees approached me afterward with words of support. We always knew you were the backbone of this place, one senior consultant told me. We're glad you're getting the recognition you deserve. Others shared that they had witnessed his inappropriate behavior with Sarah and had been uncomfortable but hadn't known what to do. The support was overwhelming and validating. The divorce proceedings were messy but straightforward. With the evidence of adultery and the prenuptial agreement we had signed years ago, there wasn't much to fight about. He tried to argue for more compensation, claiming he deserved it for his contributions to the company. But the numbers didn't lie, and neither did the founding documents. In the end, he received a fair settlement that reflected his work but not the inflated sense of ownership he had claimed. The house became mine, along with most of our shared assets. He moved into a downtown apartment, considerably smaller than our family home. Sarah disappeared from our professional circle entirely. Last I heard, she had moved to another city, her reputation in tatters. Apparently, being known as the secretary who broke up a long marriage and then got fired wasn't great for one's career prospects. I felt no sympathy. She had made her choices knowing full well the pain she was causing. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are severe. Would you do the same in my place? As for him, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he struggled with the transition. Being unemployed and disgraced after years of being the celebrated entrepreneur wasn't easy. He tried to start a consulting business of his own, but without the reputation and systems we had built together, it floundered. Some people reached out to him out of old loyalty, but when they learned the full story of what had happened, most distanced themselves. The business community can be surprisingly unforgiving when it comes to matters of character. I threw myself into running the company. It was challenging taking on the full public-facing role after years of working behind the scenes, but I discovered I was good at it. Better than good, actually. Without his ego and need for constant praise, decision-making became more efficient. I promoted several talented employees into leadership positions, including 2 women who had been overlooked during his tenure. The company culture shifted, became more collaborative and less hierarchical. Client satisfaction actually increased, and we landed several major new accounts. About 6 months after everything happened, I was invited to speak at a women's business leadership conference. The topic was overcoming adversity and claiming your worth. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of women who had their own stories of being underestimated and overlooked, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. I told my story, not for revenge or sympathy, but to demonstrate that we are never as powerless as we might feel in our darkest moments. For years, I let someone else take credit for my work, I told the audience. I convinced myself that partnership meant staying in the background, that love meant not demanding recognition. But true partnership is built on mutual respect and honest acknowledgement. When that respect disappears, when your contributions are erased and your dignity is trampled, you have every right to stand up and claim what's yours. The standing ovation that followed brought tears to my eyes, the first I had allowed myself to cry in public since everything began. My relationship with my adult children was tested during this time. They struggled to understand how their mother could be so ruthless with their father. "He made a mistake," my son argued. "People have affairs. It doesn't mean you destroy everything." But my daughter saw it differently. "She didn't destroy anything," she told her brother. "He destroyed his marriage. Mom just protected what she built. There's a difference." Eventually, even my son came around, especially after he learned the full extent of his father's disrespect and lies. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights I lay awake questioning my decisions, wondering if I had been too harsh, too unforgiving. Divorce after 23 years is painful no matter the circumstances. I grieved for the life I thought I had, for the partnership I believed we shared. I grieved for the younger version of myself who had trusted completely and loved without reservation. But I didn't regret my actions. Dignity, once lost, is nearly impossible to recover if you don't fight for it. The financial independence was both liberating and lonely. I could afford anything I wanted, travel anywhere, do anything. But I had no one to share it with. Friends tried to set me up on dates, but I wasn't ready. Perhaps I never would be. The betrayal had left scars that time would fade but never fully erase. That was okay. I had my work, my children, my self-respect. That was enough for now. Do you think I overreacted? One unexpected consequence of everything was the number of women who reached out to me. Former colleagues, acquaintances, even strangers who had heard my story. They shared their own experiences of being diminished, disrespected, or betrayed. Many were still trapped in situations they felt powerless to change. I found myself offering advice, sharing resources, connecting them with lawyers and accountants and business advisors. It became a kind of informal mentorship that gave me purpose beyond just running a company. I also made changes to our corporate structure to ensure that contributions were properly documented and recognized. We implemented transparent equity agreements for new partners, clear documentation of who did what, regular reviews of compensation and title alignment with actual responsibilities. I never wanted anyone at our company to feel the way I had felt, invisible and erased despite their crucial contributions. The company continued to thrive under my leadership. Revenue increased by 30% in the first year alone. We expanded into new markets, developed innovative service offerings, and built a reputation not just for excellent work but for ethical business practices and respect for all team members. Industry publications wrote articles about our turnaround and transformation. Ironically, the company became more successful after he left than it had ever been with him at the helm. I ran into him once, about a year after everything happened. It was at a charity gala we both had connections to. He looked older, diminished somehow. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes. He asked how the company was doing. "Thriving," I said simply. He nodded, his expression unreadable. "I suppose I underestimated you," he said quietly. I looked at him, this man I had once loved more than anything, and felt mostly indifference. "Yes," I agreed. "You did, but that was your choice. just like everything else. As I walked away from that conversation, I realized I had finally let go of the anger. It had served its purpose, fueling my determination and clarity during those crucial early days. But holding on to it long term would only poison my own life. He had to live with his choices and their consequences. I had to live with mine. The difference was, I could live with mine. My conscience was clear. I had fought for my dignity, protected what I built, and refused to be victimized. Those weren't actions I needed to apologize for or regret. Looking back now, 2 years after that fateful Tuesday when I discovered the affair, I can honestly say I'm grateful for how everything unfolded. Not for the pain, not for the betrayal, but for the awakening it forced upon me. I had spent too many years making myself smaller, dimming my own light so his could shine brighter. I had convinced myself that was what partnership meant, what love required. But real love doesn't ask you to diminish yourself. Real partnership celebrates both people's contributions equally. The business world now knows my name and my story. I'm no longer the invisible partner, the woman behind the successful man. I'm the CEO who built a multi-million-dollar company from a grandmother's inheritance and refused to let anyone take that away from her. Young women in business schools study our case as an example of protecting intellectual and financial contributions in partnerships. Lawyers cite our founding documents as a model for how to structure business agreements that protect all parties fairly. Comment if you know someone like this. But beyond the professional recognition, what matters most is that I know my own worth now. I don't need external validation to understand my value. I don't need someone else to acknowledge my contributions for them to be real and significant. I built something remarkable, and when it was threatened, I had the courage and the resources to protect it. That's not ruthless or cold. That's self-respect. That's dignity. That's refusing to be erased. If I could go back and talk to myself on that terrible Tuesday afternoon, standing frozen in the hallway outside his office, I would tell her that everything would be okay. More than okay. I would tell her that the pain she was about to endure would transform her in ways she couldn't imagine. That she was stronger than she knew, smarter than he ever gave her credit for, and capable of not just surviving but thriving. I would tell her that losing someone who doesn't respect you isn't actually a loss at all, it's a liberation. To anyone reading this who feels trapped in a situation where they're undervalued, disrespected, or betrayed, you are not powerless. You have more strength and resources than you might realize. Document everything. Know your worth. Understand your rights. And when the moment comes to stand up for yourself, don't hesitate. The people who truly matter will support you. The ones who don't weren't really in your corner to begin with. My life now is different than I imagined it would be at this stage. I'm single, running a company, and navigating a world I thought I'd be experiencing with a partner. But I'm also free, respected, and living authentically. I wake up every morning knowing that I stood up for myself when it mattered most. I look in the mirror and see a woman of strength and dignity, not a victim of someone else's selfishness. That's worth more than any marriage certificate or partnership agreement could ever be. The secretary thought she was winning something when she pursued my husband. She thought she was claiming a prize, a successful man, a powerful position, a comfortable life. But she was building her future on lies and betrayal, on someone else's pain and stolen moments. That foundation was never going to hold. Real success, real happiness, real security, those things are built on integrity, respect, and honest work. Shortcuts and betrayals might offer temporary satisfaction, but they always crumble eventually. As for my former husband, I genuinely hope he learned something from this experience. I hope he understands now that people are not interchangeable, that contributions matter, that respect is essential. I hope his next relationship, if there is one, is built on honesty and mutual appreciation. But whether he learned those lessons or not isn't my concern anymore. He's responsible for his own growth and his own life. I'm responsible for mine. Running the company has taught me new things about leadership and about myself. I've discovered I'm more confident than I realized, more capable of making hard decisions, more comfortable with conflict when necessary. The woman who used to avoid confrontation and smooth over problems has learned that sometimes confrontation is exactly what's needed. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to fight back, to refuse to accept mistreatment, to demand the respect you deserve. Was I wrong to feel this way? The employees who witnessed everything have become some of my strongest supporters. They saw the grace with which I handled an impossible situation. They saw me transform pain into purpose, betrayal into strength. Several have told me that watching me stand up for myself inspired them to make changes in their own lives, to demand better treatment, to speak up about their contributions, to refuse to settle for less than they deserved. That ripple effect means more to me than any financial success ever could. I've also learned to forgive myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for making excuses, for trying so hard to preserve something that was already broken. Hindsight makes everything clear, but in the moment, when you're living through it, love and hope can blind you to uncomfortable truths. I did the best I could with the information and emotional resources I had at the time. That's all any of us can do. The house feels different now, quieter but also more peaceful. I've redecorated, changed things to reflect my own taste rather than compromises we made together. Every room tells a story of reclamation and renewal. The home office where I now work on company strategy used to be his study. The walls that once displayed his awards and achievements now showcase art I love and photographs of my children and grandchildren. This is my space now, filled with my energy and my choices. Financially, I'm more secure than I ever imagined possible. The company's value has increased substantially, and my sole ownership means that growth directly benefits me. I've started philanthropic initiatives that matter to me, including a foundation that provides business education and seed capital to women entrepreneurs. Helping other women avoid the pitfalls I experienced has become a passion. Every woman who successfully starts and controls her own business feels like a small victory against a world that still too often dismisses women's contributions. My children have come to understand and respect what I did. They see me now not just as their mother but as a woman of substance and strength. My daughter has told me that watching me reclaim my power influenced her own career decisions. She negotiates harder now, documents her contributions, and refuses to let others take credit for her work. My son has become more aware of equity in his own marriage, more conscious of acknowledging his wife's contributions. Perhaps some good has come from our family's pain. The broader business community's reaction was mixed at first. Some saw me as vindictive, a woman scorned who destroyed her husband's career. But most, especially once they knew the full story, understood that I had simply protected what was rightfully mine. Interestingly, many male executives reached out privately to express support, some sharing their own stories of being undervalued or betrayed by partners. Apparently, the dynamic of one partner erasing another's contributions crosses gender lines, though it certainly affects women disproportionately. I still believe in love and partnership. What happened to me doesn't negate the possibility of finding a relationship built on genuine mutual respect and appreciation. But I'm in no hurry. I'm enjoying discovering who I am as an individual, not as someone's wife or partner. I'm learning what I like, what I want, what makes me happy independent of anyone else's needs or expectations. That journey of self-discovery has been surprisingly fulfilling. There are moments when I feel the loss of what I thought we had. 23 years is a long time, and there were good memories mixed with the pain. But I've learned that you can mourn the loss while still being grateful it ended. Some relationships serve their purpose and then need to conclude, no matter how much history they contain. Holding on to something dead and decaying out of loyalty to what it once was serves no one. The truth always comes to light eventually. That's something I've attenter novamente continuorlant beyond any doubt. You can hide affairs, minimize contributions, rewrite history for a while. But eventually, documentation surfaces, witnesses speak up, and reality reasserts itself. My husband thought he could control the narrative, that his version of our story would be the one everyone believed. But numbers don't lie. Legal documents don't forget. And people who actually paid attention always knew the truth. I've become something of an unintentional advocate for women in business, particularly those in partnerships where their contributions are undervalued. I speak at conferences, mentor young entrepreneurs, and consult with lawyers on how to structure agreements that protect all parties fairly. It's work that matters, work that could prevent other women from experiencing what I went through. Every time someone tells me they documented their contributions or insisted on proper equity agreements because of my story, I feel a sense of purpose that goes beyond personal vindication. The company culture has evolved in ways I couldn't have predicted. Without the hierarchical, ego-driven atmosphere he cultivated, creativity and innovation have flourished. Employees feel comfortable sharing ideas, challenging assumptions, and taking calculated risks. Our client retention rate has increased because the relationships are now based on consistent quality rather than one person's charisma. Several clients have privately told me they prefer working with our team now because the process feels more collaborative and less about stroking one person's ego. I've also implemented policies that protect employees from the kind of inappropriate behavior he exhibited with Sarah. Clear guidelines about relationships in the workplace, reporting mechanisms for harassment or favoritism, training on professional boundaries. These policies have created a safer, more respectful environment for everyone. Several employees have expressed gratitude for these changes, sharing that they had felt uncomfortable with certain dynamics under the previous leadership but hadn't known how to address them. My relationship with money has changed too. For years, I had access to our wealth but always felt like it was ultimately his, that my spending needed to be justified or explained. Now, understanding that I not only contributed to but actually founded our financial success, I feel genuine ownership. I'm not wasteful or extravagant, but I no longer feel guilty about investing in myself, whether that's professional development, travel, or simply buying something I want without seeking permission or approval. The divorce settlement included significant assets beyond the company buyout. He received enough to live comfortably, but the distribution reflected the reality of who had contributed what. Our prenuptial agreement, ironically something he had insisted on years ago to protect his assets, actually protected mine. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The safeguards he put in place, assuming he was the primary breadwinner, ended up enforcing the truth that I was the actual founder and primary contributor. I've reconnected with parts of myself that got lost over the years. I always loved painting but had set it aside because there was always something more pressing, always his needs or the company's needs or our social obligations. Now I paint several times a week, not because I'm particularly good at it but because it brings me joy. That simple act of doing something purely for my own pleasure, with no practical purpose or external validation needed, has been remarkably healing. Travel has also become a source of renewal. I've taken trips I always wanted to take but never did because he wasn't interested or couldn't spare the time. I've walked through museums in Paris, hiked in New Zealand, volunteered at a women's cooperative in Guatemala. Each experience has added layers to my understanding of myself and the world.